Alright, I'm going to take these chrome Fender strut covers off. First I better move this out of the way. Get it out of there. And put these off of here. These are like an Allen bolt sort of fastener. 7/32 is the size. Take these off. Kind of have a better look underneath. Oops. All right. Now the funny thing is, as far as I know, the early Softail frames from like 84 and 85 do not have these big struts built onto the frame. They're basically, as far as I've seen, they're just kind of finished off here. And I think the big chrome Fender strut things are probably much stronger than these ones. These are kind of like a decorative cover. You might be able to bolt them on backward and use them for handles. I don't know. But anyway, these are pretty wimpy. They're like not even an 1/8 inch thick, and so they're not really going to hold much weight if you have a passenger on the rear fender. So I think that's why they went to these, just as part of this forged swing arm piece on the frame. And as far as I have seen as well, the 2017 and newer Softail frames are actually really nice looking, except the swing arm is different. I'll talk about that in a sec here, but this part of the frame on the newer ones, like the 2017 and up, this is nice and round. It's not square like this. It's like nice half moon kind of round material, and it's like nice and even with the top edge here. These are not nowhere to be seen on those frames as far as I've seen. The one thing I really don't like about the new Softail frames is actually the swing arm, because instead of being like the classic triangle where it slopes down like this, it slopes here and then it's kind of level this way, and the frame drops like that. And it kind of reminds me of the Harley frames from like before the Knuckleheads. They had a very similar look. They almost had like an engine straddle, not the super early, like early 1900s where they had like a carriage for the engine to sit on, but basically the frame kind of dropped for the drivetrain to sit a bit lower maybe. But that's what the new Softail frames look like. So they like got this part right finally after 30 some years, but then I don't know why they like didn't put the nice traditional looking swing arm on there. And maybe you can buy aftermarket swing arms for those frames, because if you had this shape of swing arm on one of the new frames, it would look real nice. It'd look pretty close to a hardtail. Another thing I noticed on those swing arms is they kind of minimize the flat bar in this section here. This is kind of round tubing up to about here, which this is another thing that I don't like about these swing arms on the Softails, is that you have this big chunky clunky looking flat bar here, and like your suspension really only can travel up to here anyway. So I mean, why not make that round? I guess it would have cost more to produce them, and you know, they're still one of my absolute favorite Harley chassis because they just flow so nicely, except for these. If that bothers you, like it bothers me, a lot of things bother me that other people never even notice or pay attention to or whatever. One other thing, I'm just gonna take my camera off of here. One other thing that really bothers me is this heavy-duty bed frame material that they just welded in there. You can see it's like not quite angle iron, it's like that rounded corner, like bed frame material is kind of what it looks like. Right, you got your stoppers in there, 2 rubber stoppers, 1 on each side. Can't really see, there's the other one. So your rubber stoppers, 1 there, 1 over here. And those are what the swing arm tube here hits if you bottom your suspension out. And that's all tucked under this bed frame angle iron here. Now the thing I really don't like is that they put this ugly looking material in there. Looks like it came off a shelf in a hardware store. And I would love to get rid of that. Everyone who chops one of these things, they'll chop their Fender struts off right about here. And they'll leave this big divot here. I'm planning on filling mine with weld and cutting these off and just contouring everything so it actually flows really nicely, so it looks like a proper hardtail look, but Softail frame. So if I could, I would cut this angle material out of here. I'd just cut the whole thing out, cut these welds in here off the tubing, cut this here, and get rid of the whole thing. And I would take and weld a pipe across from this side to this side, right behind the main tubes of the frame here. But I don't think that's a good idea because, first of all, you might lose a bit of your clearance for your swing arm travel, right? For this thing here to travel forward. But the bigger reason I don't think that's a good idea is because that's going to take away all of your stability side to side. This is a lot of leverage, over 2 inches on this part of the frame. That's like literally your top cross member on the main frame itself. And so you can't really, or you shouldn't get rid of this any further forward, because if you cut this out, it's going to let these flex like that, and that would not be good at all. And you might not notice until you're doing 100 miles an hour and you hit a bump in the road or something, and then what do? If your bike moves weird or flexes weird, or one of these welds breaks because they're taking all of the strain of whatever's going on back here with your rear suspension and drive line spinning and your wheel spinning. That's just not a good situation to end up in when you're doing highway speeds all of a sudden, because you wanted your frame to look like 5% cooler than it could. So I think I'm just going to leave that. I'm planning on cutting these off, yarding these things out of here, and probably sell them for scrap weight, because they probably weigh like 40 pounds, and it's good quality steel back in the 80s, back when they were still milling brand new steel in the US everywhere. So yeah, I think next thing I'm gonna do is maybe undo these shock bolts wherever the heck they are down in here. Undo each side of those. I'm waiting on another bike lift thing here so I can lift the whole thing, have it nice and stable. I wanted to get one with the little perches that you can put your frame rails on, because those shocks actually hang down just a tiny bit below the frame, and I don't want to squish anything or put pressure on anything. I want to lift directly from the frame if I can to get the weight off of the back wheel, and then undo those shock bolts down there and kind of lift the swing arm and see what kind of travel I have and what sort of clearance I've got in here. Now, another issue that I realize I might run into is when I do hard mount my fender to the swing arm, I've got to notch the fender to fit around here so I get the fitment properly, so I don't have the fender pushed back to here and, you know, ending way out here somewhere on the inside. So I got to get the fitment right. But another issue I might run into is when the suspension moves, I might actually crunch the fender on here. So, you know, it might, I might have to look at that. I think possibly a compromise would be to just notch this thing a little bit. You know, take maybe a 1/2 inch out of here, contoured with the fender. I don't think that's going to be enough change to really affect anything. You know, it is what it is. I'll have to see. I want it to look cool, but I also don't want to make it unstable or dangerous, or, you know, take away all the engineering. I'm not going to be able to engineer a stronger chassis than this thing. I mean, this thing is bulletproof. That's why they weigh 1,000,000 pounds, you know, because they're just heavy duty. You know, I don't think I've ever seen one of these frames all bent and wrecked and broken from just riding, unless you're really hard on your stuff. But anyway, yeah, I'm still waiting on money for parts and stuff, Fender and all that, so I'll keep you guys posted when things change. I might not put many videos up until I really get rolling into this project. And yeah, who knows? We'll see how it goes.